Hey, everybody, welcome to the Addiction Unlimited podcast, where you get to learn everything you want to know about addiction and recovery. I'm your host, Angela Pugh, co-founder of Kansas City Recovery, life coach, and recovering alcoholic. To learn more about me, you can listen to episode 0 on your podcast app or find us on the web at addictionunlimited.com. If you've ever found yourself asking, why do I keep spending when I know it's not helping? You're not alone. Hello, my friend. Welcome back to another episode of the Addiction Unlimited podcast. I'm your coach, Angela Pugh. Many of us fall into the trap of trying to fill emotional gaps, manage stress, or escape uncomfortable feelings by spending and buying more than we need. This is the same thing we do with alcohol and other substances. But that momentary buzz you get from clicking add to cart quickly fades and you are left feeling worse, not better. Today, we're not just talking about what's happening on the surface. We're diving into the real reasons behind overspending and, more importantly, how to break free from that cycle for good. And to help us on this journey, I'm joined by a very special guest, Paige Pritchard. Paige is the inspiring voice behind the Overcoming Overspending movement, which has grown to millions of followers on social media and is transforming the way women approach money. She's also the host of a top 50 self-improvement podcast, the Money Love Podcast, where she empowers ambitious women to leave financial self-sabotage behind and unlock their full financial potential. I've also created something just for you to support you in this episode and everything we talk about. Simple steps to regain your money and your mind. This is a free resource that takes everything Paige and I talk about in this episode, and I put it all in one place for you. So you don't have to worry about trying to remember every detail and trying to remember her 4-step process and all those things. I took it all, I put it together for you in this free resource. Simple steps to regain your money and your mind. And you can get that at addictionunlimited.com/overspending. And of course, I will link that in the show notes so you can get there right from your favorite podcast app. In this episode, Paige will share her expert insights into what drives those spending impulses and how to develop practical, life-changing strategies to regain control of your spending. Together, we explore the emotional roots of overspending, the mindset shifts needed for lasting transformation, and actionable steps you can take today to build a healthier, more empowered relationship with money. So if you're ready to stop wondering, why do I keep doing this? And start living with intention, financial freedom, and peace of mind, this episode is for you. Let's get started. Oh my gosh, Paige, I am so excited to dig into this conversation. Thank you so much for coming on and doing this episode with me.
Yeah, I'm honored to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, why don't we start with just tell everybody a little bit about you and what you do.
Yeah, so I am Paige Pritchard. I am the founder of Overcoming Overspending, which is an online community where I help and work with and coach women who are really struggling with their spending habits. Whether you tend to be an impulse shopper, whether you're overspending and going into debt, whether you're an emotional shopper and you tend to use shopping as your emotional crutch. But how I kind of define it in my world is just you keep finding yourself spending money in a way that's against your own good, and you're spending money in a way that's ultimately creating results with your money and with your finances that you're not loving. So it could be credit card debt, right? You could be overspending and spending more than you have coming in. And, you know, the natural byproduct of that is being in credit card debt. It doesn't have to be that you're in credit card debt. I work with a lot of women who aren't in credit card debt, but they're also struggling to make any sort of meaningful progress towards other financial goals that they want to be working towards, because they are just spending right up to that limit of everything that they have coming in. And a lot of the women that I work with, like, they make good money, but they're also spending a lot of it. So they're kind of in this mindset of, I feel like on one hand, I have the money game together. Like I'm a good earner. Like I'm good at making money. I have a lot of money coming in, but I just, once it's here and once it finds its way into my bank account, I just cannot seem to hold on to it. It just feels like sand just kind of slipping through my fingers, and a dollar comes out and it goes right, or a dollar comes in and it just goes right back out. So you and I were talking about this before we recorded. We'll absolutely get into this, but this is just an issue that many people are struggling with. People have always struggled with this, but I think that this issue is really coming to a head even in the last decade with how quickly our world and our environment is changing with social media, with technology, with COVID. I mean, you name it, and the way that we shop has drastically changed in the last decade, and not really changed for the better, right?
Mm-hmm.
Changed in a way that shopping is becoming a lot quicker, a lot faster. Our consumption has sped up. It's so easy. It's so convenient. And a lot of people are finding themselves struggling with this. There's not really a lot of like specific help and support out there that's actually helpful. That's actually not just like, just stop doing it. It's so easy. Just stop. Or like, just unsubscribe from emails. That will solve your problem. So I've also struggled with this a lot in the past. I was a compulsive shopper in my 20s. And so, all that to say, we can get more into my story, but I've struggled with this. I know how hard it is. I know it's frustrating to not feel like there's advice out there that actually can help you with this issue. And so, a couple years ago, I was just like, people need help. I will be the one to run through that brick wall and offer solutions to actually help people. So, here we are today.
Oh, I love that. What I love so much about what you just said is I love that you highlighted all the different ways that spending can be unhealthy, right? Because it isn't just credit card debt. And I think that's what a lot
Yeah.
of people think of is running up debt. And it doesn't always have to be that. And I love that you said like a dollar comes in, it just as quickly goes out. Like you can't figure out, because this is something that I struggle with. It's like, sometimes the end of the month, I'm like, wait, what the heck happened? Like,
Mm-hmm.
how did I just went through this with one of my businesses where I had cut some expenses and then I got to the end of the month and it still didn't have any money. And I'm like, how did I cut expenses and still end up like, what the hell is going on? You know? So I
Yeah.
just appreciate that you really laid that out, that this isn't a one thing, a credit card debt or school loan debt or tax debt. Like, it doesn't have to look like that to still be unhealthy and causing you some discomfort in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. And the analogy that I commonly like to use to just like bring this point home is especially with our higher income earners, right? Where you feel like you're making a good income where, like you're not living paycheck to paycheck. You know that you have plenty of money on a monthly basis to make sure that all your bills are paid. I kind of equate that to like having a really fast metabolism where you're like, I can just eat whatever I want because I know I have a really fast metabolism and I know that my metabolism will take care of all this bad eating that I'm doing and I won't see the number on the scale go up. Like I'm not going to be gaining any weight, so therefore it's not a problem. Like as long as I'm not gaining any weight, it's not a problem. And I think that's the mindset that a lot of people are in. As long as I'm not in credit card debt, like we're good. But meanwhile, you're eating all this food that, you feel awful. You have no energy. You're not sleeping well. You've got brain fog. Like you're not properly fueling your body, but you're like, it's fine because I have a fast metabolism and I'm not gaining weight.
Right.
And so that's like the big thing too, is I think getting into credit card debt is one of the first flags that goes up the totem pole where people are like, oh, like this is getting to a point where it's too far. But also probably the number one question that I get from women is, I can't really tell if this is a problem because I'm not in credit card debt. And I'm like, well,
Mm.
that can be one sign, but there's many other signs to your point that indicate that this is getting to a problem that have nothing to do with debt.
Can you run through what some of those things are aside from debt? Like, what are some of the warning signs that people can be like have some awareness of?
Yeah. So I always kind of describe this as financial red flags and non-financial red flags. So the financial red flags, one is debt. We've talked about that. The second I briefly mentioned, which is if you just have the general sense that you're not really making the financial progress that you want to be making in other areas of your life, you want to be saving a down payment for a house, can't do that. You want to be taking a trip every year, can't do that. You actually want to be saving and putting money into investments and retirement, can't do that. If you're finding yourself where other longer term financial goals are sacrificing because of your spending habits, it's like, okay, that's another red flag. Those are the two big financial ones. But then we get into all the non-financial kind of red flags. And this is where spending can actually start to impact your life in ways that have nothing to do with your money at all. And I think that you guys will probably see a lot of similarities between these red flags and maybe other, forms of overconsumption or other forms of addiction that you guys talk about a lot, whether it's food or alcohol or something else. One is strain that it can have on your relationships. I mean, that's probably one of the biggest red flags for me is like, is this causing a lot of conflict in your relationships? And it doesn't even have to be a romantic relationship. I mean, oftentimes it is your romantic partnership, but it could be, conflict that this is creating with a sibling or with a parent. If you find that you're starting to hide your behavior from other people, like you just kind of have that internal sense of knowing of like, I know that this is going too far. I know I'm doing too much of this. And, you wait until your husband's asleep to bring in your shopping bags, or you try to like hide the packages that are like showing up on the front porch every single day. Anytime you're getting to that point where you start hiding behavior, that can be another one. Impacts to your environment. This is a big one with shopping because every time you buy something, you're bringing something else into your world or into your environment. And so does your environment, your home, your space that you're living in just feel heavy? Does it feel cluttered? Do you have overflow rooms of just stuff that you like thought was going to change your life and you use 2 times and then it goes into the overflow room or it goes into the attic or the basement or the pantry or your, product graveyard underneath your bathroom sink? Do you just like walk around your house and you just see a lot of stuff that, in the moment you just had to have, and now it's just like another thing to you? And another big one too is just the amount of time. I think this is one that people forget, but just how honestly time consuming shopping can really, really be across online shopping, whether you're online shopping or shopping in person, going and looking for stuff, researching, adding all the stuff to your cart, buying the thing, tracking the packages, unboxing things, returning things, right? Having to drive to the UPS store every other day because you keep buying things and then it gets delivered to you and you're like, wait, why did I do that? Like, I don't have the money for this. I need to return it and get my money back. So how much of your time are you spending on this thing? I think that's one of the biggest things that's for me that I love with my clients is they're like, Paige, I don't even know what I'm going to do with all my time now. Like I have so much time to like do all these other things now that I'm not spending so much time shopping. And then the last one, and this one is pretty much with anything, but just like the impact that it's having to your overall mental and emotional well-being and also just your confidence with money, right? Where you just get to this point where you just feel like I cannot trust myself with my money, and just the hit that can have to just your confidence, your mental and your emotional well-being. So if you're seeing any of those that are like non-financial, whether it's your time, your relationships, your mental and emotional well-being, your environment, that can also be a good sign that, okay, we're getting to a point where we might want to get some help around this.
Well, I feel like you must have been at my house when you were just going through all that. I was like, well, when did she come over?
I know.
I've definitely recognized, it's so fascinating that you brought up environment because I do some focus on environment with people to help them quit drinking. And that's not something that most people even have an awareness of, right? But environment is so incredibly important because your environment, your home, your car, your office, that is a direct reflection of how you feel internally.
Yes.
So when I notice the chaos in my house or chaos in my car. My car's getting messy and stuff is starting to pile up and I just haven't taken care of it and put things away, whatever. When I notice that chaos, that's a great sign to me that I'm a little off kilter. And
Mhm.
I have recently had this experience with shopping, right? Like noticing like how many clothes I have. Like it is crazy how many clothes I have and how
Yeah.
much space it's taking up. And I've gotten really good the last couple of years at purging, right? Going through the closet, like, dude, you haven't touched that shirt in 4 years, donate that thing, right? Like
Yeah.
this is like, get rid of the stuff. Like don't have stuff just to have stuff.
Yeah.
But it's insane the amount of space that it can take up. And you're right, like you just keep adding to it. And then it's like, where do you put things? And then I
Mhm.
started implementing the system of rotating the winter clothes out when the summer clothes come in. So I have space. Like
Yeah.
it takes on a life of its own.
It really does. And the clutter piece is really big because there's actually been so many studies that have shown the negative impacts that clutter has just to our health. I mean, it raises our cortisol levels, which is the stress hormone. It puts us in a low grade state of fight or flight. It reduces your mental capacity, right? Because it's like, think about when you're walking through a room, every single thing that is in your room or in that space or in that room is taking up like your mental capacity, even just to like look at the thing and notice it and see it or whatever it is. And this isn't to say that all of us need to go and, completely purge everything and live this like
Right.
Spartan, like minimalist lifestyle. But it really is, to your point, like evaluating my space matters. My environment is really important and it really, really matters. And it absolutely is having an overall impact on my well-being, my productivity, how safe I feel like in my own space and in my own environment. Like, does my environment feel like it's like totally draining to me, or do I feel safe and rejuvenated when I'm in here? And so that's one of the biggest, impacts of this issue is just the impact that it'll have to your living space and your environment.
Yeah, I mean, it makes me feel terrible about
Yeah.
myself, honestly. Like if I walk through my house and things are just in disarray, and because
Yeah.
I'm not dirty, but I can definitely get cluttered. I work a lot. I'm super busy and things just get set down and I forget about them. I'm ADHD AF. So out of
Mhm.
sight, out of mind. I can set something in one room and I'll never think about it again, you know?
Yeah.
And then like when I walk through my house and I start noticing like every room and everywhere there's just stuff that I haven't put away and haven't taken care of. And it makes me feel terrible. And
Yeah.
I think like a little bit of imposter syndrome comes in there for me. And I would imagine everybody else feels the same way. But I think about it like with my clients, I'm like, oh my gosh, like if my clients walked in my house right now, this is not what they would expect it to look like. Like I'm not being authentically who I portray myself to be,
Mm.
and that feels weird. Like I don't like that either.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good that's a really good point, because I think like this issue can really get yourself to a point where you realize like you're shopping to shop. Like you kind of said that earlier, where you're like, I just bought this thing to bought this to buy it. Like I'm shopping to shop. And that can be the really hard part, is that the shopping gets to a point, and this can also be another like kind of red flag here to kind of tune into and pay attention to, is the shopping more so becomes about the act of it. Like I just want to be shopping. You don't really care about what you're buying. Like what you're buying kind of gets to a point where it's kind of irrelevant. It's kind of like it doesn't matter. Like it can literally be anything. I just want to be buying
Mm-hmm.
to buy. I just want to be
Mm-hmm.
shopping to shop because I want to numb and I want to
Mm-hmm.
distract, or I've become, like addicted to the sensation of literally just buying anything. Like it can just be anything. And so to your point, that's how our worlds get filled up with like all of this stuff that's like, it doesn't matter. Like you don't actually like, it doesn't matter. You don't care about it because it was never about the thing that you were buying. It was simply about
Right.
you just wanted to be engaging in the act of shopping. And so then you get like your wardrobe doesn't feel like you. Your house doesn't feel like you. You start to kind of create this life where you're like, this just doesn't even like feel like me because it was never even about the stuff to begin with.
Yeah. It's so interesting. We were talking about this before we started recording too, that, to me, I feel like COVID was a huge shift in shopping world, especially for those of us with compulsions, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
for me, I'm still a person that really prefers to shop in person, especially like for clothes. Like I like to go clothes shopping. I want to touch things and see how they are. Um,
Yeah.
Way more than online shopping. I feel like I can buy 40 things online and one of them will fit. You know what I mean? Like that's not
Yeah.
even fun to me. I'm more apt online shopping. I'm more apt to buy things for my house, and not so
Mm.
much clothes, but,
Yeah.
but during COVID, right, we had to quarantine and everything shut down. And what happened is it forced us to get really comfortable online shopping. So even
Yeah.
for somebody like me that wasn't so apt to online shop before, now, all of a sudden, it's my only option. Now, all of a sudden, all of my cards, debit cards, credit cards are all saved on autofill. Now, all of a sudden, every website I go to is then sending me 40 ads the rest of the day on every
Yeah.
other website I click on, right? So, like, and the thing
So true.
I looked at, now they're throwing it up when I go on Facebook, they're retargeting. And like, it has become insane, like, what's available and how quick you are to just hit buy.
Yeah. The way that technology in general, the way that the internet has just totally transformed, like obviously the way that we live, but specific to this conversation, the way that we shop is insane if you think about it. I mean, like thinking about, I grew up in the 90s. And so for me, even thinking about like when I was a kid and when I was growing up, it was like if you wanted to shop, you had to like get your mom, get in the car, drive up to the mall. You'd spend a couple hours at the mall, but you were walking all around, you were going into this, like whatever, right? Now it's like you literally pull up your phone, pull up your laptop, you can have 10 tabs open all at the same time. You're adding stuff into your cart. And I think like even with online shopping, you're very much so in this more like um willy-nilly mindset where you're like, well, I'll just get it. Like I'll get it and I'll have it delivered. And if I don't like it, I'll return it. But then you blink and the 30-day return period has gone by and you're like, crap, I totally forgot to return this thing. And now you're stuck with it. Right. But online shopping, a lot of studies have been starting to be done on this. And a lot of studies are showing that online shopping can be twice as addicting as in-person shopping because it's almost kind of like you're shopping twice or you get those double hits of dopamine. So you get the initial rush of dopamine while you're shopping online, while you're perusing and adding things into your cart, and then you click that buy now button. And then you have this like anticipatory period where you're like waiting for it to get there, right? And to your point, it's not even that long of a time. It's like maybe a couple hours, maybe a day, max two. But you still have this period of time between deciding to get the thing and it actually being in your physical possession. And that's exciting, right? Like we love, and that's where, dopamine is called the anticipatory molecule, which means that we get a huge release of it just in anticipation of the pleasurable thing to come. So while you're waiting for the package to arrive, you're like, oh, I can't wait for it to get here. And then it arrives. And that feels amazing because it's here finally. And then you get to unbox it and now it's here and you're holding it and, it's yours. And so you take that whole experience where there's like all these kind of different releases of dopamine throughout a longer period of time versus to your point, like when you're just going into the store, it's fun to have that experience, but like then you buy the thing and you immediately have it in your possession and then you just go home. So online shopping has completely changed the game and it also has sped up the rate at which we're consuming as well. Because you can't, like to
Right.
your point, most people don't have the time to go shopping, like in-person shopping every day, right? Like we're busy, we have
Right.
jobs, we have
Right.
obligations, we have responsibilities. We can't just like spend every day at the mall. But we can online shop pretty much every day if we want to, right? And so it
Yeah.
is really just sped up the rate at which we're consuming, not only our access to it, how frictionless it's become, how easy it's
Mhm.
become, one click buys, get it in 2 days, the allure wears off like that, and then you're just off to the next thing. Consumer spending reached an all-time high about a year ago. It was like October of 2023. Consumer spending reached an all-time high. And I think that a big reason for that has been the rate at which we are buying and spending money and consuming has sped up so drastically. Like we are moving through that purchase cycle so much faster than we used to. And I think online shopping is a big reason for that.
Yeah, I would definitely agree, because you have to think too, it's definitely emotion based. Because we're coming off COVID, we're coming off these really hard years when people's lives were completely unhinged in a lot of ways, right? And everything is crazy freaking expensive right now. Like there is nothing reasonably priced right now. Groceries are through the roof. Like, I mean, it's kind of crazy. So to me, those are indicators. If consumer spending is at an all-time high, that's an anxiety, emotion-based spending, just like we're eating, just like we're drinking and we're doing all of these things. Gambling is huge too right now. And, sports gambling is being legalized in more and more places, and that's blowing up. And marijuana is being legalized in more and more places, and that's blowing up. All these things are emotion based.
Yeah, completely. And that's why, like, I think, shopping too, it's in my opinion, and I'm probably a little biased to this just with what I do in my work, but I think that there's so many different layers to this emotional component, especially with shopping, because to your point, a lot of people, shopping is their emotional crutch. So it's like shopping is what we do to make myself feel better. And shopping is very similar to alcohol in that way, where it's like, oh, you've had a bad day, like go get some retail therapy.
It's the reward,
and kind of like pick yourself up. But it can also be like a reward, right? Like, oh, like you got the promotion, or you got this, or you got the new job, or like whatever it is, like let's go shop, let's go celebrate. So it's like, no matter what's happening, no matter if things are going bad or things are going good, no matter how you're feeling, it's kind of like we're shopping. And a lot of us too, I think this is interesting to look at, is like, how was shopping portrayed to you in your childhood? Like I work with a lot of women who were like, I grew up very much in a household where we shopped to feel better, and we shopped to entertain ourselves, and we shopped to celebrate, and it felt like our lives revolved around shopping. And so there is this huge emotional component to it where it's like, am I somebody who tends to shop a lot when I'm in a negative mood and I'm wanting to make myself feel better? Like that's how I kind of give myself a little pick me up, is shopping how I celebrate. And then there's this other emotional component of it, which is kind of where it really starts to get like kind of deep. But I always say there's also so much emotion behind why you buy the things that you buy and why you want the things that you want. Yes, we can kind of get into that pattern that I was speaking about earlier, where it really does just become about the act of shopping, and we care less and less and less and less about the thing that we're actually buying. But there actually is a ton of emotion that goes into why you want the things that you want and why you want to buy the things that you want to buy, like why you want this brand over this brand, or why it's like you've got to have, the tumbler that everyone has, or you've got to have the brand of shoes that like everyone has. There really is so much emotion that goes into those choices, right? Like I always say, you want the things that you want and you desire the things that you desire because ultimately of how you think you're going to feel once you have it, like once you've bought it, once it's in your possession. And that's what marketing and advertising is, right? Marketing and advertising, it's not about the products that they're trying to sell you, right? Like the product is just the vehicle through which the emotion is delivered. So like you think that you're buying the product, you think that you're buying the thing, but what you're really buying, like behind the product, once you start to dig deeper, is you're buying an emotion, you're buying confidence, you're buying belonging, you're buying desirability, you're buying being more organized, you're buying being a better mom, you're buying being like whatever it is. There's so many examples, but there's that emotional component too. So when people are like talking about emotional spending, I'm like, all spending that you do is emotional. Right. It's all emotional. It's either driven by how you're feeling now, or it's being driven by how you want to be feeling once you buy the thing.
Oh, that's so good. That's
Yeah.
so good. Okay, so I want to flip to the other side of this now in what are some of the solutions? Like
Mhm.
for those of us that are sitting in an overspending space and struggling with what that looks like, or maybe cleaning up the mess that we've created, because I get that a lot with my clients too, that they're like, I'm just struggling with all of this financial chaos that I've created and I'm trying to figure this out. And I only make so much money, but I have this much debt. Like this can be
Yeah.
a really, really major thing, especially if you have like credit card debt, tax debt, student loan debt, and you're on a fixed income. Like that's
Mhm.
hard.
It
So,
is.
and I want to say also getting into the solution side of things, because I feel like especially as someone who I definitely had struggled with credit, right? I when I was younger, I literally destroyed and rebuilt my credit no less than like 3-4 times, So I know how challenging that is, but I also understand how terrifying it is, right? And
Mhm.
when you want to start rebuilding your credit, the first thing they tell you to do, get a copy of your credit record. You're like, that's the last thing I want to do, dude. I don't want to look at
Yeah.
that thing. I'm humiliated. I'm disgusted with myself. Like, I don't want to look at the effing credit report, you know?
I
And I feel
know.
like with spending, it's the budget. You got to start budgeting. You got to look at where your money's going. And I feel like that first step alone creates such a barrier to make people not want to do it.
Yeah, totally. I'm with you. I'm with
So,
you.
is there a solution or starting to get in the solution that you don't have to do that quite yet?
Yeah. So here's what I'll say, right? Is that I have a process that I take every one of my clients through that are a part of my community, and it's 4 phases, right? And I always say think about it kind of like an iceberg. Okay, so with an iceberg you're going to have 10 to 20% that's sticking out above the water that you can actually see, and then you have the 80 to 90% underneath the water that you can't see with the human eye. And we always want to start with that 10 to 20% that's sticking out above the water, because that's like the low hanging fruit. Those are the things that are the easiest to do. You can do them now, you can do them quick, and you can see fast improvements with them. So, those first 2 phases have to do with your environment and with your money. And I know that you
Nice.
talked about this with your environment with drinking. That's also really important with your spending is I call it elevating your environment. So elevating your environment into an environment that is going to feel supportive of the behavior change that you are that you are now trying to make. The hard thing about spending money is like you can't completely abstain from it, right?
Right.
Like you're going to have to spend money. You're not going to be able to go through the rest of your life without spending any money. And you're also not going to be able to completely eliminate every single spending trigger in your world. Like
Right.
it's impossible to do it.
Right.
But what you can do is start with what are my patterns around spending? Patterns around spending can be things in your environment. So you're like, every day, I've just gotten into the habit. Every day I drive through the Starbucks line. Every day at 2 o'clock, I get up from my desk and I walk down to the convenience store in my office and I'm buying this and I'm buying that. And I'm buying the little treat here. Triggers can be other things in your environment. Like, yes, I know I mentioned this earlier. This isn't like a complete and utter solution, but it can be. It can be emails finding their way into your inbox. It can be people you're following on social media. It can be ads that you're served on social media. And those are triggers that are very easily controlled, right? Like you can unsubscribe from emails, you can unfollow people, you can mute ads. You can take a lot of steps to say, I'm going to eliminate these spending triggers from my life. Spending triggers can also be people. So, if you have your shopping buddy, you're like, she's my girl. She's my, like, whenever we're together, like we're shopping, we're going to the mall, we're going here, we're going there. And this is not to say you have to cut people out of your life, but it is to say like, hey, listen, like maybe let's go do this instead. Let's do something else besides shopping. But it really is just kind of like taking a look at your environment as a whole and saying, how can I change things in my environment? How can I elevate it so that it is supporting the direction that I want to go, right? Like I'm sure you probably tell people, I don't know this, I'm guessing, I'm assuming, but I'm assuming that you probably tell people like if you want to quit drinking, don't have a bunch of alcohol in your house.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
Like
Yes.
it's like don't have like a liquor cabinet full of alcohol that you can very easily have access to if you're trying to quit drinking. And it's the same thing. Like don't just like stroll up to Target and be like, well, I'm just going to look. I'm just going to look. Like I'm just going to go up to
Right.
Target. I'm just going to stroll around and like see what they have, but I'm not
Right.
going to like buy anything. It's like that would be like saying that you want to quit drinking, but like you're like, I'm just going to go and sit at the bar. Like I'm
Yeah.
just going to, it's like, no, like go do something else. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like there's a million other things that you could do besides just like go strolling around Target. So your environment is where I always have people start because it's easy, it's quick, you can do the changes and you will immediately feel like, okay, this is a great first step getting me to where I want to go. Then you have the money piece, which to your point, yes, this is the uncomfortable part. And before you're going and making a full blown budget, you know, with this, that, or whatever, I don't even have people start there. I'm like, listen, all I want you to do is just to get intimate with your spending again, which sometimes people are like, oh, trust me, I'm very intimate with it. But oftentimes we're not. It's like we're actually very disconnected from it because we're just doing it very like habitually, subconsciously, automatically. Like it's like a habit. It's like something that's just firing and happening.
What does it mean to get intimate with it? Like explain that in a little more detail.
Yeah.
Because I agree, like I get the disassociated part or desensitized
right.
for sure, you know, because you don't even have to think about it. Like I said, like, all my stuff is stored on autofill. Like I don't have to think about spending at all. I don't have to do anything. Hit a button, right? There's no connection. So when you say get intimate with your spending, what does that really mean?
What I mean by that is just bringing back visibility into where your money is actually going and the purpose that it's serving in your life currently as things stand right in this moment. So, a very easy exercise that you can do is just start writing down, either like writing it down in a journal, writing it down in your notes app of just anytime you go out and spend money, just write it down and try to do that for 7 days. Just say, okay, I don't have to do this forever. I'm just going to do this for 7 days. And at this point, we're not even really trying to change the way that you're spending money at this point. We're literally just trying to bring conscious awareness to like what is actually going on and what's actually like how much are you spending, what are you spending on, like what's happening and what's going on, because again we just get so kind of like in the fog of it, we really lose sight of that. And so just start writing it down. Again, we're not at the stage yet where we're going to start creating budgets and doing all of that stuff, but and then the other one that I would say too is, and I know this one is like very uncomfortable for people, is actually like logging into your accounts, and you don't even have to do anything, but just like logging into your accounts and actually like facing the reality of your current financial situation, which I know, Angela, you were like, I don't want to do that. And I know nobody wants to do it. It
Yeah,
sucks,
because when you're in a bad spot, like it's just terrifying.
I know.
It's like nothing will engage fight or flight faster than something like that because it just feels so bad. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the really sinister part about avoidance with anything, right? Like just avoidance in life, but especially avoidance with your money, is that when you're kind of in that ostrich syndrome, right? Where you have your head in the sand, I think a lot of the times we just try to tell ourselves, like, if I just avoid it long enough, like a magic pill will somehow happen and I'll like figure this out, or like, a solution will just come raining down from heaven one day and I'll be like, oh, that will solve all my problems.
I'm going to have a windfall of cash and then I'll never have to worry about it again. Yeah.
But, it's like when you're having the thought of like, I am having a lot of anxiety around facing the reality of my financial situation because I know it's going to be bad. What I always have to like remind the women in my community of is every day that you delay this, it's just getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. Like every day we're digging ourselves a little deeper, a little deeper, a little deeper. So yes, it is. It's going to suck today. to log in and see the balance on your credit card, or to log in and to see the number in that checking account. But doing it today is going to be better than doing it a week from now or 2 weeks from now, because those numbers are just going to keep going up or keep going down, depending on what it is that we're looking at, right?
Right.
So that's how you start with creating that intimacy with your money, is connecting back to it again, because oftentimes people who really struggle with this have completely disassociated from their money.
Yeah.
And we've got to bring that intimacy back.
For sure. I know, again, for me, going through money things, because I grew up poor, right? Like money was always a source of contention and stress and anger and anxiety. It was all negative. And that created a lot of beliefs in me that were really challenging, that created a lot of money issues for me. So when I really started digging into some of this stuff, I am a very woo-woo spiritual person. So I went law of attraction, of course, like really understanding. And this to me is getting intimate with my money, my spending, my habits, my belief systems, the stories I'm telling myself, right? For me, it's more meditation and things of that nature, but really getting real, journaling, really getting real with what's happening. And when you start down that path, you start learning about limiting beliefs and a scarcity mindset. And that was such a major part of the puzzle for me in many areas of my life, but I just really hit home for me majorly with money stuff. Do you work with any of that limiting belief, scarcity mindset? Are those pieces that you touch on?
Yeah, absolutely. That is like going back to my iceberg example, that's the part, the two pieces that are the two phases of the process that are underneath the surface of the water are mindset and emotions. But with the mindset piece, the scarcity component of that is big. It's huge.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that's really important for all of us to realize, is like, as adults, we are still doing things, thinking about things in ways that were ingrained in us, like especially with money, that were ingrained in us at a very, very, very young age. And especially if you are somebody who grew up in poverty, or you experienced financial trauma or financial hardship, or and again, it doesn't even have to be like this like big T trauma thing that like happened to you. I mean, it can literally just be like growing up in a household where there was perceived frugality, where you were constantly being told like, no, we can't do that. That's stupid. That's frivolous. Like, what a waste of money, things like that. Oftentimes what will happen is you would logically think that somebody would also become a very frugal adult. But oftentimes what we see is that there's just a complete rejection of that mindset and that behavior, and the pendulum swings the total opposite way. And you go from being like, I was told no so much as a child, or I experienced a lot of restriction, financial restriction as a child, that now that I'm an adult making my own money, like I don't have to tell myself no anymore. And so I'm going to buy whatever I want to buy, and I'm never going to tell myself no. And it's always yes. And like, woohoo. And so the scarcity piece of it, and just really doing the work to really unpack your money past, and potentially, if it's relevant for you, like past financial trauma. Like, people don't even, like, when people think of trauma, they don't even realize that financial trauma is a thing. Like, it is
1,000%.
1,000%.
Yeah.
So it plays a big role.
Like you're saying, like even in my home, there was no big T trauma around money. I guess there kind of could be, because I have little brothers that both had illness. So that was pretty traumatic in itself. But the after effect of that, right, was the medical bills. So for me, really, as a little kid, and even as an older kid, when my little brothers came along, like there just was always so much anxiety around money. And it was always, shopping at the discount grocery store, clipping all the coupons. Always, it was just never enough, never enough, never enough. We can't afford that. We can't buy that. We're not like those people.
Yeah.
It was just constant anxiety and negativity around money.
Yeah. And that's actually the part of this that on the surface logically doesn't make a lot of sense to people, because I think a lot of people think that when you have a background like that again, that scarcity will bubble to the surface in the form of being kind of like a money hoarder. And I feel like
Mm-hmm.
a lot of us probably know or can think of somebody like that, where it's just painstaking for them to spend money on anything. Just like getting them to
Mm-hmm.
like let go of their money for literally anything is a painful process, right? And let me just be clear, that's not healthy either. Like that's like
Right. Right.
unresolved stuff just bubbling, and scarcity mindsets around money just bubbling up to the surface, you
In
know,
a different
in
way.
its own way. I
Yeah.
think that that's how a lot of us think about scarcity with money, is like, oh, I didn't have enough as a kid, so I need to like hoard it and hold on to it now. But scarcity can bubble to the surface in a completely different way. And it can actually show up in ways where you're like, I don't know when more money is going to come. I don't know when more is going to be available to me. So while I have this now, I might as well spend it. Like while I have it now, I
Yes.
might as well just go ahead and get what I want, because I don't know
Yes.
when this is going to happen again. And so scarcity can also come to the surface a lot in overspenders. It's just manifesting itself in two different ways. And like I said,
Right.
neither of those ends of the spectrum are healthy. What we want to do is we
Right.
want to kind of get into that middle ground between those two things, to where you are spending money in a purposeful way, right? And you're not having a lot of like resistance around spending the money or letting it go, right? Like to your point, that's a lot of law of attraction stuff. Like you trust that more is coming and that sort of thing, but you're also not over here just spending to where it's all gone
And
either.
rationalizing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And I think, speaking for myself, obviously, what it did for me is it just put me in a constant state of anxiety around money. It put me in a
Yeah.
constant heightened emotional state. And you are not going to make good decisions for yourself and your life ever from that state of mind. I don't care if it's about money, relationships, it doesn't matter what it is. But when you are in that heightened emotional state of mind that is anxiety ridden, you are not going to make good choices, period.
No, no. It's just kind of like being in that fight or flight brain, right? Like that
Yes.
reactive, that like very emotional, where like prefrontal shuts off and we're very much kind of operating from that fight or flight type of brain. You're not going to be making decisions around your money or your finances that are going to have your long-term best interest at heart. It's very much so going to be of the mindset of, I'm just going to do what I want to do in this moment. And it's a very like short-term, narrow
Right.
mindset. Yeah.
I heard something with self-sabotage that talked about this because of course in my communities we talk about all of this a lot, right? Like, why do I drink when I really don't want to drink? Why do I eat the
Mm.
cheeseburger when I really don't want to eat the cheeseburger, or the ice cream? Like, I know that's not really what I want, but I still do it. Why do I spend when I know I'm trying to save? And in that self-sabotage, it was said to me that self-sabotage is because you are serving the right now version of you instead of
Mm.
serving the long-term version of you, right? It's like,
Yeah.
I want the feeling right now. I want the dopamine hit right now. I want it right now. And you're not thinking, but really, I want that money in my savings account, or really, I want, to be sugar-free, like whatever the thing is. It's just, you get caught up in that moment and you go for it just in that moment.
Yeah, and that's so very very true, and something else I want to offer as well that's been really like eye-opening for me around the topic of self-sabotage, whether it's with money or any other area, is like ultimately what's happening with self-sabotage is like you're engaging in the thing that ultimately feels safe to you in the moment. And this can be like a really tricky thing for people, like especially with money, because let's take alcohol for example, right? I think a lot of people with alcohol, I think this is just a good example. People, like, it's very clear to us in our human brains of like, yeah, of course I don't want to be like, on paper, on the surface, of course I don't want to be an alcoholic, of course I don't want to drink so much, of course, like it's very like that thing that we want is like clear to us, right? With money, we tend to have a view of course I want more money. Of course, like of course I want to have all this money in my bank account. Of course I want to have an investment account. Of course I want to be able to go on this trip that I want to go on. Like logically we're like, yeah, of course. But what we fail to understand is like something looking nice on paper, especially with money, might not actually feel safe to you in your body because it's not familiar. And that's all your human brain is here to do, is to do what it knows, because what it knows is safe and certain and will keep you alive. It will ensure the end goal of your human brain, which is survival. And that's why it can be like so confusing for people, like what you were talking about. Because on paper, it can be really easy to be like, well, of course, I want to have more money. Of course, I don't want to be spending so much. Of course, I want to have this, that, or whatever. But if that's not a result that you've ever created in life, or if that's not a pattern that you've been living into, it's going to be unfamiliar and therefore it's going to be unsafe to your body. And so that's why it's like you continue to engage in these behaviors that on the surface, you can clearly see from your logical brain are not helpful to you and are not serving you, but in a weird kind of like sinister way, it feels safe to you. And this is why this stat always blows my mind. This is why 40% of 40% of lottery winners end up declaring bankruptcy. Like not just like, oh, I spent too much, like no money left.
Because money doesn't fix your money problems.
Yeah. Well, and it's this self-sabotage, right? It's and it's like most people, like, this is just statistically speaking, most people who play the lottery are lower income. And so most lottery winners have a drastic change in their financial circumstances, like boom, in an instant. And so it's like this, like I always think of self-sabotage of kind of like the bucket of crabs, right? Like where you put a bunch of crabs in a bucket and one crab tries to crawl out and the other crabs are just going to like pull it back in. That's your self-sabotage behavior, where your reality might be reflecting one thing, but your self-sabotage, your identity, your nervous system is going to be the thing that's going to like pull it back down. The same is true for professional athletes, right? Like Sports Illustrated did a study that showed that 80% of NFL players are broke 2 years after leaving the league. I saw recently that Antonio Brown, who, if you're not a sports person, he was one of the best wide receivers in the league. He played for the Steelers for a long time. I think he made $80 million over his career, and he just filed bankruptcy. He has $50,000 worth of assets to his name after making $80 million over his career. And a lot of people want to look at that and be like, oh, well, it was because of this and and like whatever. They have all these theories and reasons. But I'm like, no, this is like self-sabotage at its finest.
Yeah, for sure. It's all of those mindset things, because you can get so much money. Money is not going to fix the mental and emotional problems we have around money. And it's not going to fix self-sabotage behaviors and habits that we've been practicing for years. Yeah, no amount of money in the world is going to fix that stuff.
And that's why, like, something that I say a lot, which a lot of people don't like this, but I'm like, I know you don't want to hear this, but you need to hear this. If you have a spending problem, an outflow problem, right? More money is not going to solve your problems, right? You will just continue to spend up to that limit. And again, if you're listening to this, you might have even recognized this behavior in yourself, where you can see patterns where over the years, you've just been continuing to tell yourself like, well, once I get to this salary, once I'm making this amount, once my business is generating this much money, like then I'll be good. And then you get to that point and you're still experiencing the same issues that you experienced when you were making half as much. And that's because more money didn't ultimately solve your problem. It just compounded your problem. Like if you're struggling with spending too much, more money is only going to give you more money to spend.
That's right. Yeah. This was the indicator for me years ago that this was an internal issue.
Yeah.
Because I had this realization where I was like, damn, dude, like I have the ability to make a lot of money. Like I can make a lot of money. How do I always still end up back at zero?
Yeah.
And that's when it dawned on me. I'm like, this isn't a money problem. This is a mental and emotional problem. I've got to dig into what's happening in my brain, of course, because that's where everything stems from. And all of the brain things stem from childhood, so I was like, I've got to dig in and see what's really going on. But that was the thing where I was like, oh, wait a minute. This isn't about money. This is me in my head.
Yeah, totally. And that's why I'm like, That's why my process is that more like holistic approach and that holistic process with the 4 phases and the iceberg, because I'm telling you, with money specifically, most people spend 90% of their time on the 10% that actually matters, right? They're spending 90% of their time and energy on that 10% that they can actually see above the water because they can see it. They're like, oh, okay, like
Right.
that's what I need to do. I need to get on the budget. I need to, check, do all the things.
Mm-hmm.
And then they stop because they think like, okay, I did it. Like it's done. To your point, not realizing, oh, no. Like we've just begun. Like there's all this stuff that's happening underneath the water that you can't see. It's happening so subconsciously. The mindsets, the emotions that you really have to dig into to change who you are on a core level. And I see this a lot with women with debt, especially. This is another kind of indicator. Like if you are somebody who goes through the debt cycle a lot, where you're like, you rack up the credit cards and you pay them off, you rack them up, you pay them off. And you're like, I'm done. I'm never going to do this again. Like I'm done with this cycle. And then boop, another year goes by and you're like, how did I just rack up another $10,000 of credit card debt? And the problem is, like I said, you make good money. You're a good earner. Like you can effort your way to continue to, okay, pay it off again. Okay, pay it off again. Okay, pay it off again. And it can be so frustrating to go through that cycle. And eventually you've got to come to the realization of the reason that this keeps happening is because I am efforting my way through actions to solve this problem. I am not changing who I am on a core level. Like the person who racked up the credit card debt the first time is the same person who racked it up the second time and the third time and the fourth, or however many times you've gone through this cycle. And to your point, Angela, it's like you've eventually got to get to a point where you're like, okay, let's start doing the stuff underneath the water. Because that's really the only way to break this cycle, is to start doing those deeper, like the mindset, the emotions.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing so much valuable information with us. This has been an incredible conversation.
Yeah, it's my honor.
And I'm going to be on your show too. So whenever that goes live, we'll share that with everybody also.
Amazing.
But Paige, I love the work that you're doing. It's just so valuable. And it's stuff that we need to be talking about.
Yeah.
Like you said, more now than ever, we have to be having these conversations because overconsumption is at an all-time high in every way. And moving forward, for all of us to have the true peace that we want in our lives and the freedom we want in our lives and the control we want in our lives, like ultimately we have to get our shit together and be better at these things.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I always say, like, again, the world that we live in is that is the role that we play, right? Like we play the role of consumers and consumer culture. And you really have to be diligent about taking back your power in this space and saying, like, I am going to be diligent about my role in this and how I'm choosing to spend my money. I always say, like, one of the two is going to have the upper hand. Either you're going to have the upper hand over your money, or your money's going to have the upper hand over you. And that's a power dynamic that you have to intentionally take control over. So it's not an easy thing to do. It's a worthwhile thing to do, just like anything you guys are talking about here.
Sobriety.
Yeah. Whether it's alcohol or food or, gambling, right, is another one that we didn't even touch on. But anyways, we'll talk about that one when you come on my podcast. I want to talk to you about that one, about the gambling one.
Perfect. I look forward to it. Thank you again. I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Wow. What an incredible conversation. I learned so much from Paige today, and I hope you did too. The insights that she shared about the emotional drivers behind overspending were truly eye-opening for me. And what really stood out to me is just how similar the compulsion to spend is to the compulsion to drink. At the core, it's the same emotion-based action. We spend to comfort ourselves, to chase that dopamine hit, or to celebrate life's highs or drown the lows. Whether it's overspending or alcohol, we're trying to fill an emotional void or numb uncomfortable feelings. But as Paige reminded us, we do have the power to break that cycle and regain control. Just like with drinking, it starts with understanding the emotions that are driving our actions, then building healthier ways to cope. And the tools that Paige shared today were so good and easy to help you take those first steps toward a more intentional and empowered relationship with your spending habits and with yourself. And remember, I created the free resource for you with everything Paige talked about in this episode in one place, the emotional cost of overspending, simple steps to regain your money and your mind. It's designed to help you dig deeper into those emotional triggers, to give you practical steps to stop the overspending cycle for good. And it's everything that Paige talked about in her 4-step process. I put it all in the guide, and you can get that at addictionunlimited.com/overspending. I know you're going to find it super helpful, so you don't have to go back and take all the notes. I already did it for you. If you found today's episode valuable, share it with someone who could benefit from these insights. Paige is doing such incredible work, and I really want to keep sharing this. Let's keep spreading this important message together. Until next time, stay intentional, stay mindful, and keep taking small steps toward the life you truly deserve. I hope you're having a fantastic day, and I will see you next week.
You've reached the end of another great episode of the Addiction Unlimited podcast. Candid and honest conversation about addiction and recovery. Be sure to visit us at addictionunlimited.com to join the conversation and access show notes and links to everything we talked about. Love this episode? Please take 30 seconds to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes to help us improve and give you the information you want. Thanks for listening. See you next week.